This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi show number 364. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my Star Wars Run Rival Weekend mug from 2019. Thrilled to talk Star Wars with you this week. On today's show, Marc Kleinhenz joins us to talk about Star Wars and haunted houses, how they actually go together much more beautifully than you might expect. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining me today for a cup of coffee is the editor-in-chief of the Orlando Informer, Marc Kleinhenz. Marc, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
I have a confession for you, Dan. Is it too early for confessions?
No, this is the perfect time.
Okay. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but I do love my green tea. So I'll have green tea with Kenobi tonight.
You know what? It's got a nice ring to it. Marc and I have been chatting for a while. Marc is, of course, a big contributor to the CWK Cafe, our Facebook group. And Marc suggested, I'm not sure when you sent me the email, probably a month and a half ago. Does that sound about right?
Before school started, so might as well be a leap year at this point.
Oh, you know what? You're right. And it does all kind of in a sort of weird, surreal avenue of time anyway. But Marc has this great blog that's up. Part one is up right now on Coffee with Kenobi. It aired, or at first was live on October 9th, but it's top 5 Star Wars haunted houses. So before we talk about the blog and how beautifully Star Wars lends itself to the haunted house idea, talk to me about sort of your history with Star Wars.
Oh, God. I think it was okay, so I'm 41 years old, just to give you some kind of context here. All the way back in 8th grade, I just had like this nerd awakening. I read Lord of the Rings for the first time. The X-Files was starting. I just got into Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Next Generation. And I said, that Star Wars thing sounds kind of neat. I should probably get around to seeing what all my friends were playing with all those toys for all those years. And I just fell into it. Ever since then, I've been just reading the books, the comics, watching the movies, of course, the TV shows. Now my young kids are watching them with me, and it's just fantastic.
Isn't that wonderful? And then eventually you have been able to take your love of Star Wars and you've been able to blend that into your professional life as well.
Yeah. About 14 years ago now, my wife and I lived in Japan for about a year teaching English. And that I just kind of accidentally stumbled into freelance writing. It's something I never thought I would ever kind of be interested in or be good at. And I just job after job, year after year. And finally I was lucky enough to kind of quit my boring office day job and make freelancing my full gig. And comics, Star Wars, Stranger Things, all that fun stuff.
And then you're able to do a lot of cool stuff with the theme parks too.
Yeah, that's something. I love theme parks as a kid, and I kind of fell out of it, to be honest with you. And I didn't get back into it until just about 8 years ago. I took my wife out for her 30th birthday to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at Universal. And I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. I remember why theme parks are so special. I always love things that are immersive. I love being absorbed into a different reality and a different world, a different story. Of course, that's why Star Wars is right up there on top of the list. And theme parks really provide that in a way, when done properly, that even more than video games or a good book, I think, arguably, I don't want to get in trouble here, that's you really feel the most absorbed and surrounded in this alternate reality. And yeah, I was very lucky to be able to make that my full-time gig now.
So what did you think when you first stepped foot on Batuu?
Oh, Dion, you're exposing me. I have not been to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge yet.
Really?
I've written all about it. Yeah, I know.
Well, to be fair, there has been a pandemic, so.
Yes, we'll use that as my excuse. So I live in Cleveland, Ohio, ironically enough. I'm the editor-in-chief of Orlando Informer. I live in Cleveland. There's always some guy, there's some poor schmuck who has to stay back in the office, and he has to coordinate all the coverage, and he has to write the articles and make sure all the social posts go out. That's me. And it doesn't matter if I'm in Orlando or Cleveland or Japan. I'm the guy who has to stay behind. So I get to live vicariously through all my very professional colleagues.
You know what? That's actually really cool because that means eventually you will step foot on Batuu, regardless of what coast it is, and then we'll have to have you back on to see what you thought, especially because of the immersive notion.
Sounds good. I'd be like, hey, page 6 of that one novel kind of ties into that comic, and I was able, oh my god, I was able to see it in real life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is a thing of beauty. I mean, of course, we've talked about it a lot on Coffee with Kenobi, and we'll continue to do so in the very near future. But let's talk about Star Wars and Halloween. When you had suggested to me, and we don't obviously do a lot of blogs anymore, we sort of scaled that down and focus more on the podcast, Facebook Live, and then we do reviews and, of course, the press releases, but we haven't done a ton of blogs. But this one was too good to pass up. I mean, obviously, your writing resume is more than impressive. You've written for, I believe, 32, 33 different sites now?
You're number 34, 35, I think, but, who's counting?
Wow. Most impressive, as they say in the world of Star Wars land. But talk to me sort of about how this germ of an idea marinated in you.
I'm not much of a horror person. At least I never thought I was, but I've always had this kind of low simmering appreciation for, I wouldn't say a full outright horror, but like suspense. Because again, I think it goes back to immersiveness. And maybe it's just kind of this example of how demented my psyche is, but one of the ways I feel most absorbed into a story is, I think, just a little bit of horror. Something more like Jordan Peele, for example, or I'm a huge M. Night Shyamalan fan, actually. So it's a little stories like that, a little bit of humor, a little bit of suspense, a little bit of action, little things kind of dribbled in. But then working at Orlando Informer, you have to, like, it's part of a job requirement. You have to be obsessed with Halloween Horror Nights. This is the biggest event, the Halloween event in the entire country. It's so well regarded. It gets lots of press. It gets lots of attention worldwide. It's something that is a huge event now. There's 10 haunted houses every single year. Every single year they're different. There's 5 scare zones. There's 1 or 2 live action shows. And Universal, I don't know how much money they spend, but they must do tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per haunted house. And again, they scrap them all at the end of the season. They rebuild them the very next year, completely different. And with that kind of attention to detail and immersiveness, there's that magic word again, they're able to really recreate these realities. And usually about half of their contents are based on some kind of intellectual property or another. So Stranger Things was a big one recently, The Walking Dead, American Horror Story, all that fun stuff. So to me, seeing what is possible, seeing that giant canvas that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily think Star Wars and horror kind of go hand in hand, but man, it does.
Yeah, they've had a lot of cool Star Wars horror things. I shouldn't say a lot, but they had that great Darth Maul novel before everything became canonical. And maybe we'll see that later in your list. I'm not sure, but that one kind of comes to mind. And of course, the ones that you have on your blog too. Yeah,
once you start looking, it's kind of funny how you start to see it more and more. And then you also have IDW recently do all their Vader's Castle comics every single year. This is the 3rd year now.
That's
yeah.
Right.
Yep. They also have something with zombies. Like you never, it's something you wouldn't normally think, Star Wars and zombies. But man, I don't know if it's Disney or if it's Lucasfilm now with the current editorial team, but they love having their different zombie stories set in the TV shows, especially in the comics, the novels. So that really lends itself to the haunted house format very nicely as well.
And I can tell both by the blog and our interactions in this conversation today, you definitely are someone who is passionate about Star Wars, and you've got a pretty expansive knowledge of the canon. Do you pretty much just devour everything you can, or how do you sort of discern your Star Wars?
That's a little bit of a convoluted story, but for the sake of brevity, most recently, because of the projects that I'm involved in, I've been really focusing on the prequel era, and especially with the High Republic starting in a couple of months here. God, just a couple of weeks, isn't it? Jeez. That's been my biggest go-to for right now. But ordinarily, yes, when a novel launches, I'm usually lucky enough through my various freelancing jobs, I'm able to get these early access to the novels. I think maybe you have a little bit of that luck too, Mr. Zare.
Indeed. The force is strong with us.
So that and the comics, I still have not listened to the most recent audiobook. The first one, Count Dooku, Jedi Lost, I was able to actually listen to while at Universal in my hotel room. That was kind of like a special crossing of the streams, if you will.
An excellent, excellent story. And I think you'll like Afra as well. To be fair, I think Dooku's better, but it's also because it's more of an original story. But they're both excellent.
I can see that.
Anyway, you were saying, so you've done a lot of stuff. The prequel era jumps out, but then we get into, and we'll just go through 5, 4, and 4 so far in your blog. But and feel free to throw in any honorable mentions as long as it doesn't give away the second part of your blog too.
Sure. I actually have one that I cut because I kind of have this, as I'm sure you can tell by now, this tendency to just ramble on and on, whether I'm talking or writing. So I did cut one. Of course, you're putting me on the spot, and I can't remember the exact name of the planet, but I think we can figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Where should we start?
So let's. I love that you, for your number 5, you talked about Tom Engelberger's children's novel, The Mighty Chewbacca in the Forest of Fear. It's kind of has a. I love that Star Wars has certainly made a concerted effort, especially in the fall and winter seasons, to make things a little more holiday, and not in a bad taste in your mouth holiday special kind of a way, but more just kind of. I mean, a lot of it, of course, is sort of driven by merchandising, but there's nothing wrong with that. Star Wars has a very long history of merchandising, and I think it's sort of gone hand in hand with the success of the franchise as well. But talk to me about how this book sort of made its way onto your list.
This is one of those installments where it came across my desk, and I'm like, I'm not that big on this particular subgenre. The young readers, I think, is the exact name. I started reading it, and the narration style, where you have kind of like a fireside chat with a narrator, and he's relating the story to you very conversationally. It can be well done. It can be very interesting. I always think of The Hobbit for some reason. I always think of when I read that novel, it feels like I'm sitting next to the fire and I'm enjoying a nice glass of wine, talking to someone about this great story.
Right.
It's just not my cup of tea, not my cup of green tea, if you will. But as I got into the story, I'm like, wait a minute. The concepts here are really quite brilliant. And then the progression of the story and how it starts off as this almost kind of nonsensical, isolated, shall we say, narrative from the whole rest of the Star Wars mythology, but yet you see how it connects, and it gets back to Emperor Palpatine's his cabal of advisors, and there's these Force cults, and how he's trying to hunt down all this arcane knowledge, like we see with the Witches of Dathomir, and so on and so forth. So it kind of all comes together in this beautiful package, and the concepts are so wonderful. It begs to be a haunted house. This idea of this forest that has this fear-inducing mist, and these really strange creatures that end up all being parts, literally, of this giant ancient entity that the dark side cult kind of worships. It's just, what a delicious little story. It's very much worth it. If anyone has not out there listening, if anyone has not read it yet, I definitely recommend it.
Why don't we go ahead and take a break, and we will come back with more from Marc Kleinhenz and the wonder of Star Wars and haunted houses. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Menken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Well, I mean, and it kind of reminds me, I mean, not this particular story per se, but the Dark Legends book that came out a few months ago as just this excellent example of taking different. I mean, there are different. Obviously, horror is its own genre, but there are certainly little subsects within horror itself. Whether you've got, haunted houses, or a vampiric approach, or there's a great werewolf story. Then you've got stories of. It kind of reminds me of some of the things that Edgar Allan Poe does, but for the Mighty Chewbacca novel, it sort of just takes sort of a fun. Let's get some creepy stuff in here, and a fun way to scare and entertain the kids, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation. And that's also something else with haunted houses. You kind of think of them all as being these kind of straight up, just you walk through, characters come out. Hopefully they don't say boo, but they scare you. There's actually quite a bit of versatility within that. There's some that are straight up comedy. More recently, to go back to Universal, they've been trying to do, they call it more of a dark ride, a traditional like theme park ride as opposed to a haunted house. So last year, for example, they redid the 1984 movie Ghostbusters, and there wasn't that scary at all, but you could walk through and you're almost literally living in the scenes of this movie that you've grown up loving and watching over and over again. And that's kind of how I see perhaps Ushru, this fear planet that we're talking about, how that might be best realized in this haunt format.
And then when you're thinking about this, you sort of think about how they would set up. I want to kind of go off script here a second. Stranger Things is something that my wife and I are very new to. We didn't really come to this until after season 3 had been out.
Oh man.
Yeah, and we are absolutely 100% hooked. We've seen every episode. So was that haunted house of Stranger Things at Universal Halloween Horror Nights, was that basically centered around the first season?
The first year was the first season. The second year, which unfortunately I didn't get a chance to go out to, and I'm really kicking myself now because the whole event was canceled because of COVID. The second year was mostly season 2, and they kind of snuck in some season 3 elements at the very end.
Fast. Was it great, the one you got to go to?
The first one was really lovingly done. It felt, it sounded, it looked, it even smelled the way that you think the Upside Down would smell.
Wow.
Sensorily big element of haunted houses. And that's also something I think, going back to Star Wars, that's the one element that you can't get even in these virtual reality experiences, whether in your house or at Walt Disney World or wherever. It's just yet another way to realize this world in a way that you never have before. But for that first Stranger Things house, the centerpiece, let's back up a second here. When Universal went through, the house was finished, the sets were built, everything's there, the actors are cast, they had their photographers, they took all these pictures, they released them to all the sites. We got to release them in turn, and people just flipped out. They thought it was the sets from the TV show, and indeed, it looks just like them, like the Byers house with the Christmas lights and the alphabet painted on the wall. It really, you honestly feel like you're in that show. And the centerpiece of that was a giant 2-story room that was the government facility where Eleven would be submerged in her little tank. And that was actually the same exact size as the set that they made on the TV show. So it really does lend itself very well, I think.
Wow. Now, are they allowed to? Because I am what you might call a wuss when it comes to haunted houses. So are they allowed to like grab you and chase you and all that stuff, or do they just basically yell and you run?
That's actually a really interesting question. Hopefully, if I go too much of a tangent here, just say, "Hey, Mark, shut up."
That's all right. I'll just turn off the recording. Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead.
So for Universal and other, if you will, mainstream haunts, no, they can't touch you. They can't get too close in your face, although they can a little bit. You're not supposed to touch them. If they see you touching a scare actor, you're ejected from the event. However, there has been a growing trend in the haunt industry. And by the way, the haunt industry is this massively successful, almost exponentially growing market. Halloween itself has really taken off. It's always been popular here in America. In England, for example, it's only just the last 5, 6, 7 years that they really started to actually buy pumpkins and carve them. And you start to see all these different costumes and people really get into it as much like we do here in America.
Wow.
So it's always been popular in America, but this last 10 years or so, it's really taken off. And haunted houses in particular have been a really growing like sub-market, if you will. And one of the byproducts of this is something called extreme haunts or immersive horror, I think is what some people kind of fancily call it. The whole idea here is that you sign a waiver that says, I will not sue you even if you hurt me. And basically all bets are off. and they will touch you and they will throw you around. Some have cattle prods and they will cattle prod you. Some will waterboard you. There is, in some cases, nudity, or shall we say, adult content. Some of these different people will actually take you off the street. Like, you sign a paper that says, yes, I understand it'll start at some point that I don't know. They'll like they're kidnapping you off of the street, abducting you, and then taking you to their secret place in the desert or wherever. And I mention all this because fear is something that psychologists have been studying. Like, why are Americans, why are we so interested and obsessed with this? And some psychologists and sociologists kind of think maybe this is a way, like, we kind of outsmarted our primitive animal brains. We evolved for how many millions of years with fight or flight. And now that we've basically conquered the natural world, minus pandemics, obviously, we don't really, like, crime is the lowest it's been in a long, long time. We don't face dread, and maybe there's something biologically wrong, if you will, with us. There's a hole in the back of our little lizard brains that we need to have this jolt. And so that's a big topic of debate within the fear industry. Is it something that we need to help us as we continue along our evolutionary path?
This is fascinating to me, and for the record, there is zero chance I would ever sign up for anything like that.
Me too.
Yeah, no, thank you. But I understand there are a lot of people that absolutely love it, and I think that's why it's great when Star Wars dabbles in this, because it's a way to sort of dip your pinky toe into the waters of Star Wars and horror, but in a very safe, comfortable setting that takes these elements of these characters and these ideas and these archetypes that we know and love, and then transposes them into Halloween. And I think Lotho Minor, that you talk about in your blog, is an excellent example of that, because you've got, when this, of course, was first realized, Darth Maul had returned, which blew us away. And then we got introduced to, as you mentioned in the blog, quoting Kevin Scott, a crazy cackling spider Maul. Talk about that episode and just sort of the fun and the craziness of it.
Yeah, it's something that I never watched the Clone Wars until it was already off the air, before season 7 dropped. But it's something I had already known and heard about. But just rewatching it recently with my kids and showing it to them, I made sure they didn't know Spider Maul popped up. And so when that kind of silhouette comes on screen, my kids do not like spiders. They get that from their mom, I guess. They kind of like froze and they went, oh, my kids are 8 and 5. And they're okay. They're afraid all of a sudden of the dark basement. But mostly they're okay until they see Spider Maul. And they're like, whoa, Dad, what's that? Let's pause this and talk about this, Dad. What is this thing? And it's like, no, that's not Darth Maul. What? It's really wonderful to see just how effective and just how scary Clone Wars actually is when you watch it with your kids.
It's true. It's true. And then you take a character like Maul, who really we didn't really know all that well before he returned. I mean, he was in The Phantom Menace, and he was a merchandising phenomenon and an absolutely incredible design. Just the design of him himself. I mean, George Lucas famously said he wanted Darth Maul to be the scariest thing that people had seen. Just have that haunting look about him. And yet then you would throw in Sam Witwer's voice, and you've got this incredibly, incredibly menacing figure that I think, I mean, of course he would be half spider, right? What did you think about how they sort of converted him back to more of what we know and love and got rid of the spider aspect of him?
I'm very split on this, to be honest with you.
Fair.
Part of me wants there to be more of some kind of explanation, like who made the spider droid legs and why were they fashioned for him. I kind of squared that circle in my own little nerd brain by saying it was Mother Talzin for some reason. She just was touched by spiders that day. But on the other hand, there's a certain part of Star Wars where it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you read all 25 prequel novels that explain every nuance of the backstory. It's something about it visually and viscerally that just works. And you're right. The archetype that is Darth Maul, it does lend itself that kind of weird kind of phantasm shape. And it does make, as my kids can attest to, a very effective visual presence. And
I don't know if it was in on StarWars.com or one of the interviews that Dave did for the Clone Wars, but I feel like Maul crafted these just through his anger and his intense hatred of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then he formed them himself through the dark side of the Force, in which, is what it kept him alive, and also because of his fractured psyche. That was kind of the best that he came up with what he had to work with. Yeah.
And that does work with the whole haunted house premise because,
Yes.
again, we're dealing with fear, and fear is something that can manifest itself in all these different ways.
Kind of a Frankensteinian approach, too. I just created a new word.
Well, that makes me think of Darth Vader and Revenge of the Sith rising off of the slab. It's like that. It's kind of like that Darth Frankenstein. Listen to me.
Absolutely.
We're creating these things left and right here. Yeah, that works. Universal Monster is the classic black and white nature of that, and how with George Mann doing Dark Legends, and he said he wanted to do Nosferatu with the Sith Inquisitor. See, we all come. It's full circle. We all go back here.
That's right, and I'm glad you brought that up because we had a great interview with him a month and a half ago where he talked exactly about that and the things he was able to do through Lucasfilms. You know, they thought, well, this is a great idea, run with that. And I feel like, Mark, they are encouraging authors to use their creative side to blend these two genres together. Can you give us sort of a hint about what we might see in part 2 of your blog?
I knew at some point Darth Vader's castle would make an appearance. I thought it would be one of the highest ranking elements, but as I sat down and started to analyze all the different components of the different planets, I kind of realized, like, yeah, this is iconic, and it's, again, archetypal, and it's something that we've waited to see for such a long time. But man, the other things that Lucasfilm has managed to create, it kind of pales in comparison almost, I hate to say.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So we've got some fun, and you can certainly look for that for part 2 in a couple of weeks. Real quickly before we let you go, do you have a favorite Star Wars character that sort of evokes that Halloween spirit? Is it Darth Vader, or is there someone else?
You're really putting me in the spot here, buddy.
You sound like Corey now on our pour-over shows.
I'm kind of partial to Darth Tyranus for some strange reason. And I think part of it is the fact that he looks kind of banal. It's Christopher Lee. He looks regal, of course. He looks commanding, but he has this wonderful veneer. Like, you really do see him as Qui-Gon's teacher. You do kind of see this nobility in him, and yet there's like this hidden monster inside. He really is, in a lot of ways, an interesting reflection of Darth Sidious, and he's a character, unfortunately, even though he gets lots of screen time in the Clone Wars, he doesn't get explored very much in the greater canon. And notwithstanding the audiobook, of course, the audio drama.
Right.
But I'm hoping we get to explore that more.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. It is a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. A big thank you to our CWK Alliance members, Mary Perdue, Jason Hall, Dennis Keithley, Ross Hollowin, Cato McNichol, Alexander Moylan, Jim Capron, Smooth Rivera, Tyler Pompa, Frank Mulder, Colby Mead, LJ Souter, Daz Davies, Dustin Mills, Robert Avila, Terry King, Jeff Ellis, David Nicely, Chris Gavarka, Angela Sauce, Aaron Harris, Greg McLaughlin, Eric Struthers, Christine Turk, Brian McKinney, Alex Procasio, Hannah, Susan Gray, Ian Thompson, Dan Ream, Christian Dale, JC Poe, Ed Kimoto, Blake Weaver, Chelsea Sansbury, Yancey Evans, Craig Hargrove, Chris Metz, Connie Shee, Mark Suter, Jared Cantor, Kurt McKellen, Thea Selby, and Simbat Defterdarian. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, be sure to go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you will also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, live video, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, please feel free to reach out to me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com, and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR. There are also a lot of ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, and check us out on Pinterest. You can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I'm an official blogger there, as well as on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. And if you're considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and help you make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I'm also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. You can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our CWK sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. And don't forget to pre-order my brand new book that I wrote alongside Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, The Star Wars Book, published by DK. Be sure to pre-order your copy of the Star Wars book today. I can't wait to share it with each and every one of you. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word. Go to iTunes and search Coffee with Kenobi and you'll see the show there. My circle of friends has grown so much because of this podcast and each and every one of you, and it means so much to me that we have such a wonderful Star Wars community. Thank you all so much for all you do. Have you gotten a chance? Did you ever read Dark Disciple?
I have. That was a really interesting. I like that book way more than I thought I would. It was really engaging.
Yes, I'd say it's a top book. I think it's an excellent one. The psyche of Darth Tyranus is pretty intense because he's almost like an Iago evil for the sake of evil, really. I think
I can see that.
Yeah. Well, Mark, this has been wonderful chatting with you. We'll definitely have to have you back on Coffee with Kenobi. Where can people reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation?
I'm not much of a Twitter person, although if you do want to find me there, it's M. Sunyata. I'm more of a Facebook guy, I guess, because, again, I'm 41 years old. I guess I'm old now by social media standards. So, Marc Kleinhenz, you can look me up there. I'll be happy to chat.
I love it. Well, hey, thank you again so much for being a guest on Coffee with Kenobi.
Thanks for having me with Green Tea with Kenobi.
A fantastic conversation with Marc Kleinhenz. Thanks again to Mark for being on Coffee with Kenobi, and thank you, everyone, for joining me every Monday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time for Facebook Live at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi or www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live. Last week we talked about our favorite, funniest Star Wars moments. It was a hoot. That's right. It was really, really funny to relive all these funny Star Wars moments. So many more than I remember. But then when you hear them, you just think, oh, wow. And that kind of happens every week with this amazing community we have cultivated on Facebook Live. So be sure to join us if you can. And if you can't join us live, the show is always up on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Next week is the debut of the Star Wars book, my very first Star Wars book ever published, written by myself, Pablo Hidalgo, and Cole Horton. You may have seen early buzz about it. It's already available in the UK, and it's currently, I'm excited to say, the #1 best-selling book on Amazon for the category of Star Wars. Imagine that. I can't believe how amazing it is, how blessed I feel to be able to be a part of this incredible project, and I can't wait for all of you to experience this. Be sure to pre-order it on Amazon.com right now. The Star Wars book, again, written by myself, Pablo Hidalgo, and Cole Horton. Expect the next few weeks to be very the Star Wars book heavy. Behind the scenes, some great interviews and conversation. You will not want to miss it. Have a great week and weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for your support and friendship, and I will see you next time. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.